History rarely produces simple men, it produces contradiction. And Jerry John Rawlings was a contradiction wrapped in military boots and revolutionary rhetoric. To some Ghanaians, he was the man who rescued a collapsing nation. To others, he was the officer who normalized executions and suspended constitutional order. To many, he was both. He seized power twice, ruled without a constitution, implemented harsh economic reforms under international supervision. Then, unexpectedly, he handed power back to civilians and became an elected president under a democratic constitution. So who was Rawlings? A populist revolutionary, a disciplined reformer, a military strongman who evolved, or a man who understood that power must eventually change shape to survive? To understand Rawlings, we must return to a Ghana that was unraveling. By the late 1970s, Ghana was in economic freefall. Inflation was soaring, corruption was widespread, basic goods were scarce, smuggling has become normal, public confidence in leadership was collapsing. The military government of General Ignatius Kutu Acheampong had already faced criticism for economic mismanagement. By 1978, internal divisions within the military led to his removal and replacement by General Fred Akufu. But replacing the man did not fix the system. Among junior officers, frustrations was boiling. One of them was Flight Lieutenant Jerry John Rawlings. On May 15th, 1979, Rawlings led a coup attempt. It failed. He was arrested, court-martialed, and publicly tried. But something unusual happened. During the trial, Rawlings did not plead for mercy. He attacked the entire political and military elites. He accused them of corruption, betrayal, and economic sabotage. And his words resonated among soldiers, civilians, among people tired of shortages and decay. On June 4th, 1979, before his sentencing could be carried out, sympathetic officers broke him out of custody. A second uprising succeeded. The Armed Forces Revolutionary Council, AFRC, was formed, with Rawlings as its chairman. And then the house cleaning began. Under the AFRC, several former heads of state and senior military officers were executed by firing squads. Among them, General Acheampong, General Akufu, General Akwesi Afrifa. The justification was clear: accountability for corruption and economic mismanagement. Rawlings argued that Ghana needed moral cleansing. Supporters saw justice. Critics saw vengeance and extrajudicial severity. It remains one of the most controversial chapters in the Ghanaian history. Yet, here is a critical fact. AFRC did not cancel the already scheduled elections. In September 1979, after just 3 months in power, Rawlings handed over to an elected civilian government led by President Hilary Mann. And for a moment, it seemed the revolutionary could fade into the background. He did not. By December 31, 1981, Ghana was again struggling economically. Rawlings accused the Liman government of incompetence and corruption. On that night, he led another coup. This time, there was no short transition. The Provisional National Defense Council, PNDC, was formed. The constitution was suspended. Parliament dissolved. Political parties banned. Ghana returned to military rule. Rawlings justified it as a revolution to protect masses. The question was no longer whether he could seize power, it was whether he could manage it. By 1983, Ghana's economy was near total collapse. GDP had contracted, foreign reserves were depleted, inflation was to the extreme. Faced with a crisis, Rawlings made a dramatic shift. The revolutionary who once criticized global capitalism turned into the International Monetary Fund and World Bank. Economic Recovery Program (ERP) was launched. It included currency devaluation, removal of subsidies, public sector restructuring, trade liberalization, privatization of state enterprises. These were structural adjustment policies. They were painful, controversial, but economically, they were stabilizing. By the late 1980s and early 1990s, Ghana's economy had begun recovering. Growth returned, inflation declined, donor confidence increased. Supporters argued this was Rawlings' most important achievement, saving Ghana from an economic crash. Critics argued the reforms increased hardship, unemployment, and inequality. Both positions had evidence enough. During the PNDC era, Ghana was not a liberal democracy. Political parties were banned, Press freedom was restricted. Opposition voices were constrained. There were documented cases of detention without trial. The murder of 3 high court judges and a retired army officer in 1992 shocked the nation. Those responsible were later tried and executed, and investigations linked individuals within security circles, though Rawlings denied direct involvement. The episode remains one of the darkest moments of the era. Rawlings maintained that discipline and control were necessary to stabilize the nation. Critics argued that revolutionary justice had become centralized authority. This was the paradox. Economic reform required stability, stability required control, control reduced democratic freedoms. By the early 1990s, global politics had changed. The Cold War ended. Pressure for multi-party democracy increased across Africa. In 1992, Ghana adopted a new constitution. Political parties were legalized, elections were scheduled. Rawlings resigned from military, formed the National Democratic Congress, NDC, and ran as a civilian candidate. He won, then won again in 1996. This was historic. A military ruler had transitioned into a constitutionally elected president and a respected term limits. In 2001, he stepped down peacefully and handed over to John Agyekum Kufuor. For Ghana, this cemented the Fourth Republic, and this may be one of Rawlings' most significant legacies. Jerry John Rawlings left behind a stable constitutional democracy. Ghana has since experienced peaceful transitions of power. That foundation was built during his era. Yet, his earlier rule involved executions, restrictions, and centralized authority. He was a coup leader, a revolutionary, a military head of state, a reformer, a constitutional president. Few African leaders had embodied all 5 roles. His admirers see discipline, patriotism, and sacrifice. His critics see authoritarian tendencies and moral absolutism. History sees complexity. Rawlings once said Ghana needed probity and accountability. He enforced it harshly, then governed it institutionally. He disrupted democracy and then helped restore it. He executed leaders, then became one. He suspended a constitution, then defended one. Perhaps the most accurate description of Jerry John Rawlings is not a hero or a villain, but transition. He represented a turbulent bridge between instability and constitutional order, and where one praises or criticizes him, one fact remains. Modern Ghana cannot be discussed without him. History would debate his methods, but it cannot erase his impact. And maybe that is the final irony. The revolutionary who once rejected the system ultimately became the architect of the system that replaced him.